The brand that sold more than clothes. A simple red box, white letters. That is all it took to create one of the most powerful brands in modern fashion, Supreme. A company that started as a small skate shop in New York City and eventually became a billion-dollar cultural empire. But the most interesting part about Supreme is not the clothes. It is the psychology behind the brand. Supreme understood something that most companies never figure out. People do not just buy products. They buy identity. They buy status. They buy a feeling of belonging. While other companies tried to produce more and sell to everyone, Supreme chose a completely different path. They created scarcity. They created demand. And they made people wait in lines for hours just to buy a hoodie. So how did a small skateboard brand become one of the most valuable names in streetwear history? This is the story of how Supreme became a billion-dollar brand.
The beginning. A small store with a big vision. The story begins in 1994. On Lafayette Street in New York City, James Jebbia opened a small store. The name was Supreme. At the time, skateboarding was not the global industry it is today. It was underground. It was a culture built around creativity, rebellion, and individuality. James Jebbia understood something important. Skateboarders did not want a company pretending to understand their lifestyle. They wanted something authentic, a place that actually represented them. Supreme was designed around that idea. The store was not just a clothing shop. It became a meeting place for skaters, artists, musicians, and creative people. Customers were not simply buying a shirt. They were becoming part of a community. And that community would become the foundation of Supreme's future success. One of Supreme's smartest decisions was something that sounds simple. They made their products difficult to get. Most companies try to create as much supply as possible. Supreme did the opposite. Every week, they released limited products known as drops. Once something sold out, it was usually gone forever. This created a powerful psychological effect. People started thinking, if I don't buy this now, I may never get another chance. Suddenly, clothing became more than clothing. It became a collectible. A Supreme hoodie that originally sold for a few $100s could later be worth several times more on resale markets. Supreme understood a principle that luxury brands have used for decades. Limited availability creates desire. They were not just selling products, they were controlling demand. Most companies want everyone to love them. Supreme did the opposite. They accepted that not everyone would understand the brand, and that became one of their biggest strengths. They did not open thousands of stores. They did not create endless collections. They protected their image. Supreme made people feel like they discovered something special, something underground, something not everyone had access to. This is one of the biggest principles in luxury branding. Exclusivity creates value. When everyone can own something, it often becomes less special. Supreme turned limitation into marketing. They spent very little on traditional advertising. Instead, their customers became the advertisers. People talked about Supreme because they wanted to. They shared it because they wanted to be part of the culture. How culture made Supreme powerful. Another major reason behind Supreme's success was culture. The brand became connected with influential people in music, art, and fashion. Skateboarders wore it, artists wore it, musicians wore it, and eventually some of the biggest celebrities in the world started wearing Supreme. But the important part was this. Supreme did not feel like a brand chasing attention. It felt authentic. People were not wearing Supreme just because it was expensive. They wore it because it represented something. Creativity, independence, breaking the rules. The red box logo became a symbol. And when a logo becomes a symbol, something changes. People are no longer buying fabric, they are buying meaning. That is when a clothing company becomes a true brand. One of Supreme's greatest strategies was collaboration, but they did it differently from most companies. They did not create endless partnerships. They created moments. Every collaboration felt important. They worked with artists, designers, and major brands. One of the most famous examples was their collaboration with Louis Vuitton. It represented something bigger than a clothing collection. It showed the world that streetwear had entered the world of luxury fashion. The line between street culture and high fashion started disappearing. Supreme proved that a brand from skateboarding culture could stand next to some of the biggest names in luxury. Every collaboration created conversation. Every release created attention. And every moment made the Supreme name even stronger.
Supreme also benefited from perfect timing. When social media exploded, Supreme already had something the internet loved: exclusivity. People started posting their collections online. They shared new releases. They discussed rare items. They created hype without Supreme spending millions on advertising. The community became the marketing machine. This is one of the biggest lessons in modern business. The strongest brands do not only create customers, they create fans. Customers buy something once. Fans follow the brand, talk about it, and bring others into the culture. Supreme built a group of people who wanted to be part of the story. And when people become emotionally connected to a brand, competition becomes much harder. The billion-dollar moment script. In 2017, Supreme reached a historic moment. The investment firm Carlyle Group bought a significant stake in the company. The deal valued Supreme at around $1 billion. For many people, this was surprising. How could a skateboard brand become worth that much? The answer was simple. The value was not only in the clothes. The value was in the brand. Supreme had built something difficult to copy: a loyal community, a recognizable identity, a cultural movement. Investors were not just buying the company's current sales, they were buying the future potential of the brand. Supreme proved that a small idea, when built correctly, can become a global empire. The story of Supreme teaches important lessons for anyone trying to build a brand. First, create something people want to belong to. Products can be copied, but culture is much harder to copy. Second, more does not always mean better. Supreme created more value by offering less. Third, do not try to please everyone. The strongest brands usually have a clear identity. Some people will understand it, some people will not. And that is okay, because the people who love the brand will love it deeply. Supreme did not just create clothing, they created a movement. And that is the difference between a company and a legendary brand. So what is the real secret behind Supreme's billion-dollar success? It was not only the red logo, it was not only skateboarding, and it was not only the clothes. The real secret was understanding human psychology. Supreme understood that people want to feel different. They want to feel connected. They want something that not everyone can have. By combining scarcity, culture, and identity, Supreme created something much bigger than a fashion company. They created a symbol. And the biggest lesson is this: a great brand does not only sell a product, it sells a story, it sells a feeling. Because when people stop buying what you make and start believing in what you represent, that is when a brand becomes powerful. That is how Supreme became a billion-dollar brand.